I got the bottom of this bandsaw enclosed. Now I still need to do the top. And previously I took the wheel off, put a piece of plywood behind it, and traced around it to work out what the enclosure size is going to be for the top. So I just used that back piece I already cut as a guide for how long to cut the pieces that go around it. For the pieces that go on the bottom edge, they were a little bit tippy, so I had to clamp some pieces of wood to the edge of them to keep them from tipping over, especially with all the weight stacked on there. The back cover plywood doesn't extend all the way this way because that guide post and blade guard would interfere with the plywood. Okay, the glue is now dry on this part, which is the front, and now I'm just going to glue that to the other part. That'll be the back. This is the box for the top cover, which I plan on cutting in two, but before I do that, I want to reinforce the corners with some splines across. I cut these slots here by placing the enclosure against the fence on the saw like this, and then with this thing on there, cranking it up by 6 turns and then back down, reposition the fence, and then cut the next one. The splines for the bottom of the cover are curved because I plunge cut those slots. With the splines cut and sanded flush, I need to split this top case open, but I forgot to add the thickness of the table saw blade, so I'm going to switch to a really thin blade to not cut it as much. And for safety, it's very important to make sure your saw is turned off. Because if you try to change the blade with the saw running, the chance of injury is pretty much 100%. Well, I haven't really thought this connection through very much. I think I need to add a piece of hardwood in there to help that connection. But for now, I'll just clamp this on here. And I need a bigger space here for the blade to go through, so I need to cut a notch like this. But the wheel fits. That'll make the connection stronger. Now I gotta cut that. I added these little blocks here and here just to have something more solid to screw that back panel onto. Now the front cover. Looking at this now, I wish I'd left a little bit more vertical space here. It's plenty of space actually, but it just doesn't look quite right compared to this one or my 20-inch bandsaw. But I've actually got quite a bit of extra space in the enclosure, so I think I'll change that a bit. I also should have made that top enclosure a little bit thicker this way, so I'll add some shims there. So I'll bring the back down by about 1 centimeter, and then I can cut this part off and glue a new piece on here. I'm going to join 2 pieces of 2x4 with finger joints at an angle to make a curved bottom for that enclosure. I just added a shim to the top of the enclosure to bring it to the right thickness. This piece is already thick enough. Of course, if I'd followed my CAD model, I could have avoided all that. I'm using my beam compass to trace a new shape that will follow the curvature of the wheel. And now I'm just placing the front cover part of it on top of that to glue it while it's on there to make sure everything will be lined up. Okay, I think I like this shape a little bit better. This is with the blade guides all the way up and the cover doesn't get in the way at all. Lots of space here. So if I wanted to flush trim something off of this box, fits under there no problem. I'm adding a couple of ribs to the back of the enclosure because the plywood I used was just a little bit too thin, so it's just not very stiff. I've done lots of little work without filming it, like adding this extra shim here because the cover is now thicker, and adding this piece which I hadn't added before. I still need to sand that, and of course these things here which will help stiffen up the upper enclosure because this plywood is very thin. And next I have to mount the piano hinge in here. Okay, I got the hinge screwed to one side. Now let's put this on the bandsaw. And that's lined up to my satisfaction. I'll just try to mark where this hinge follows on here. And now taking the hinge off the cover to mount it on the post. That was super finicky getting that hinge in the right spot. And now with the piano hinge screwed onto the cover already, I have to screw it to the saw. The blade guide's bumping up against the cover here, so I need to cut a little bit off of that. Still not all the way up, but it's bumping on the inside of the enclosure. Rather than cut up the enclosure, I think I'll just shorten this blade guard a little bit. All these after-the-fact tweaks could of course be avoided by carefully following the plans, but I don't so much follow plans, I make them. I still need the guard for the blade here, and I'm going to have a piece right here, and then this part that covers it from the side. And then I decided on a slight design change for this part. I had to round this corner a little bit so that it wouldn't get caught up on the blade guard when I close it. And the reason I have this notch cut out of here is I often end up bumping against that front part when I'm cutting notches in the side of a long piece of wood. My latches are cut out of a strip of solid metal, but if you don't want to make one of those, you could just buy a screen door hook. The upper latch is attached to the guidepost clamp, and because that clamp has two positions, it needs two screws to hook onto on the cover. I still need to make a cover for that drive belt pulley sticking out the side. I cut a notch here to fit around part of the pulley right here. And this doesn't offer a whole lot of flexibility in terms of adjustment, so if I ever change the pulley or the motor, this will need adjustment as well. With the enclosure done, it's the final shape that it's going to be. I still need to varnish it and paint it and add the electrical. By comparison, my 20-inch bandsaw doesn't even seem that big anymore compared to this one. And for reference, this is my 16-inch bandsaw. I don't have a 14-inch bandsaw to compare it to. Well, it's now 12 days later and no progress on here other than painting a few bits of the enclosure. And I also made another pulley without a tilting rudder lift just to show how that's done. And the reason for that is I've been working on the plans and they are now done and up on my web store. The actual plans drawings are 34 pages of drawings. That's if you print them relatively small. Then there's also the building instructions, and those are actually over 80 pages of printouts if you print them, which is why I don't recommend that you print them, and I also don't send out paper copies because it's just too many. These are all just blank pages just to show it. As for the drawings, the only ones that you really need to print out are some of the templates, specifically the templates for the trunnions. This is the upper part of the trunnion, and this is the lower part of the trunnion, and there's two mirror images of these, which are very important for matching up the dowels when it's glued onto the support beam. And getting a set of plans done is always a really long slog, so I'm really looking forward to not working on the plans anymore, to actually put the finishing touches on this bandsaw, varnish it, finally balance the wheels, put electrical on it, and then I can just use it.